Recently, one of my dearest friends, Gigi Hoffman, was in town visiting from New York. We were eager to catch up, so she invited me to Shabbat dinner at her brother Michael and sister-in-law Tracy's house. Now, I always assumed that Shabbat dinner was just the Jewish Sunday family dinner, except that they had it on Friday nights. But I learned that Shabbat dinner is a traditional Friday night meal in Jewish households that marks the beginning of the Sabbath, the day of rest and spiritual renewal in Judaism. According to Scripture, God created the heavens and the earth in 6 days. Day 1, God created light. Day 2, God created the sky. Day 3, God created the earth, seeds, and plants. Day 4, God created the sun, moon, and stars. Day 5, God created sea creatures and birds. Day 6, God created land animals and humans. And on the 7th day, God's work was done, so he blessed the day and made it holy. The word Sabbath comes from the Hebrew word Shabbat, which means rest. Shabbat is meant to remember the creation story, the exodus from Egypt, and the hope for a future when the Messiah will bring truth, peace, and righteousness to his people. Shabbat is observed from a few minutes before the sun sets on Friday evening until the appearance of 3 stars in the sky on Saturday night, or an hour after sunset. There are usually 3 meals: Friday evening dinner, a traditional lunch on Saturday, and a meal later Saturday afternoon. I was apprehensive about the dinner. As a Christian, I was taught to believe that Jesus was the Son of God and was the Messiah who was sent to earth to save us from sin. The Jewish faith believes that the true Messiah will one day come to save the Jewish people. Tonight, would I feel out of place? Hospitality is important in the Jewish culture. They welcome guests to Shabbat dinner the same way Abraham and Sarah in the Bible would offer food and shelter to strangers of all faiths. Jewish people worship God by honoring tradition and spending time with family. Shabbat Shalom is the Jewish greeting that means may you have a blessed and peaceful Shabbat. Shalom in Hebrew means peace. Gigi and Michael's parents, Dr. and Mrs. Hoffman, were also in town visiting, and the 6 of us stood around the dinner table as Mrs. Hoffman lit the 2 candles. The lighting of the candles can be traced back to Sarah, who would light the candles every Friday in the tent she shared with Abraham. The candles miraculously stayed lit until the following Friday. Lighting the candles symbolizes bringing light and holiness into the home. After Mrs. Hoffman lit the candles, she covered her eyes. She did this in order to avoid benefiting from the light of the candles before saying the blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lahadlik ner shel Shabbat. Dr. Hoffman then picked up his wine glass and recited the Kiddush prayer that blesses the wine. The wine is blessed to remember the Sabbath and keep it holy. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen. Dr. Hoffman then recited the Hamutzi prayer over the challah. The challah symbolizes the manna from heaven that nourished the Jewish people during the Exodus when they escaped from a life of slavery in Egypt. It is told that grains fell from the sky for 40 years. These grains were ground into flour to make bread. There were 2 challah loaves at our table to symbolize how God provided for the Jewish people in their time of need. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Amen. We then sat down and we had the most amazing meal. It started off with gefilte fish. We had matzo ball soup, beef brisket with mashed potatoes, and then my all-time favorite, kugel, which is this delicious egg noodle dish that tastes like dessert. The Hoffmans were gracious hosts who taught me about their culture and religion. I learned so much about the prayers and the rituals that they performed on the Sabbath. The Jewish people have a rich and beautiful history that they work very hard to keep alive. From there, the conversation ranged from talking about U.S. politics to the state of affairs of Israel and the continued hope for the release of the hostages from the Hamas attack. But we also talked about the Dodgers winning the World Series, as Michael is a huge baseball fan. It was a beautiful evening filled with joy, laughter, and deep conversation, and it was a wonderful way for me to spend my Friday night. That night, I found a commonality between the Jewish culture and my own Filipino culture. Collectivism is a way of being that both of our cultures embrace. As a future clinician, I must work from a theoretical framework that will honor the Jewish community's beliefs and understand the struggles they may face. Shabbat comes to an end Saturday evening when 3 stars appear in the sky, or 1 hour after sundown. To mark the end of Shabbat, Jewish people perform a small ceremony called the Havdalah. The Havdalah signifies the end of Shabbat and the beginning of the new week. The ceremony involves a braided candle, wine, and spices. They light the candle, bless the wine, and smell the spices to remember the sweetness of Shabbat. Attending my first Shabbat dinner was a wonderful experience. I loved learning all about the Jewish culture and their traditions. I feel truly blessed that I was welcomed into the home of such warm and loving people. To the Hoffman family, I say Todah, thank you. And to everyone, I say Shalom, peace.